Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Kucsera, and in this episode of Fantasy Lore and More, Astrid V.J. is joining me to talk about her book, The Apprentice Storyteller. So, welcome, Astrid, and let's talk about The Apprentice Storyteller.
Hi, Melinda, and thank you for having me. It's great to be on your show. The Apprentice Storyteller is a futuristic fantasy novel set within my greater world. I write both historical fantasy and futuristic fantasy, all in the same place, but at different times in the place's history.
Can you explain, what exactly is futuristic fantasy and, how that differs from sci-fi? 'Cause now I'm curious.
Absolutely. Well, I have both spaceships and magic in my world.
Oh.
And the spaceships run on magical devices.
Oh, that's neat.
There is also other types of technology that is not run on magic. So it's kind of the intersection between our world, or a world slightly more advanced than we are, and the whole fantasy concept of magic. So I suppose a good way to say it is, well, we all know what urban fantasy is. It's fantasy set in our world. The characters have mobile phones. They travel in cars. They take airplanes. They know what spaceships are, but they also have magical powers. And so this is the same concept set on a fantasy world, but also where it's sort of sci-fi-ish technology, but it's not actually like sci-fi, which is very focused on the technology, how it works, and then what it means for the people living with that technology. This is far more loosely done. And this is, yes, one of my characters travels in a spaceship. There are some details about what that looks like, but it's not really the main point of the story.
Oh, that's neat. So it's called futuristic fantasy. Is that like a genre there's like many books in it, or is that like something unique to
It's
you
an
that you're in
up-and-coming
the niche?
genre. I've read a few more books like mine that have a very strong fantasy element and the technology, with more of a focus on the technology just being part of the world building and not actually being an important element to the story itself. One example is Adrian Murphy. He's written a series about, oh goodness, what is it? It's the Four Sender series. That's it. And it's essentially it's about future Earth sending people to find a new planet, and then it turns out that planet has magic.
Oh,
So
that's so
the sort
cool.
of the Earth invasion goes completely awry because they're not expecting dragon shifters and trolls and that sort of thing.
No, that would send things off in a wow.
Yeah.
That sounds neat. I'll have
Yeah,
to look into
mine
that.
is a lot more Star Wars-ish in terms of it being a galactic empire with a sort of a dark past. And now the situation is that people are downtrodden almost everywhere. And then there's this magic user who comes in and helps people find a new way, and particularly pisses off the Empress quite a lot with his stories that go against the grain and support the underdog and tell versions of history that are not accepted by the Empire, because there are versions that put the Empire in a bad light. And so The Apprentice Storyteller is the first book in that series, which is about a boy he's about 13 years old, who ran away from home because things just weren't working out and it just wasn't where he needed to be, and crosses paths with a storyteller who happens to be the greatest storyteller in the Empire. And she has no interest whatsoever in having an apprentice, but he just dogs her and keeps following until she eventually relents and gives in and accepts him as her apprentice. And they go off on an adventure that she wasn't expecting at all. And what I really, well, since you asked about world building, I was feeling very homesick when I started writing The Apprentice Storyteller, because I'm from South Africa, but I live in Sweden now. So I wanted a sort of desert feel, but not completely arid. So I went, okay, semi-arid regions. And then I thought, well, I mean, South Africa has a really classic one called the Karoo. And so I started drawing on that, and then it just, spiraled out of control from there. So all the landscapes in The Apprentice Storyteller are drawn from my experiences of South Africa, and kind of, show my love of the natural world as well. And then there's also the undercurrent of not all is well in the empire, and hence in the planets that the empire has been abusing. And one of those elements is connected to the magic, because I use natural magic. So in a sense, nature itself has magic. And when it's in balance, everything is the way it should be. And when it's not in balance, certain sicknesses develop, but they're magical sicknesses. And in The Apprentice Storyteller, you meet a troop, I suppose that's the term, is a troop of meerkats that have gone a little bit crazy and behave a bit more like piranhas than meerkats.
Oh no.
Yeah, one of my readers said that the monsters in the series are weird but fun, and the meerkats, the blight-struck meerkats, were a lot of fun to write. It's not such a usual type of monster.
No. I can't think of any other book or even media that I have consumed where a meerkat was the villain. Well, not a villain, but was not,
A monster, yeah.
Yeah, that was some kind of monster after humans or anything.
And that kind of is I suppose that's the main thing in my writing, is to have sort of the fun element of the new world, the monsters to fight and the magic in it, but also having elements from our world that, we need to take care of nature. We need to take better care of each other. We need to do more for those who have less. And I look at those from very different lenses throughout all of my books. In The Apprentice Storyteller, I also did something very purposefully that I'd only really been doing subconsciously before that. I'm also a transformational life coach.
Oh.
And I've been writing sort of uplifting transformational messages into my stories. But The Apprentice Storyteller is the first one where I deliberately wrote a story arc based on the coaching course that I give. So this is the flip side for me. I'd been wanting to write this book for almost a decade. When I was sitting in my my coaching certification, and suddenly the penny dropped that, yes, the apprentice learns about storytelling from the storyteller, but she learns the life coaching sort of course from the kid. And so we have a mentor-mentee situation where they actually cross paths, and they're both mentors in different areas of what each person's life is about. And so that then got me to the point where I realized I needed to write a follow-up for the storyteller. So Viola's story is actually written in Finding the Way, and it's book 1.5, because the rest of that series is going to follow the apprentice and his story. But I really needed to finish her story first and kind of package that up and send her on her way so that she can have a nice life.
Wait. This is a fantasy book and the mentors get to live. Because
Yes,
usually the
this
mentors
mentor.
die.
Yes, I am well aware of that. This mentor gets to live because she had spent 20 years of her life on the run from the empire because her storytelling and who she was didn't suit the
Mm.
system. And he gave her the tools she needed to be able to achieve what she was looking for in a way that worked within the structures of the existing empire. So she could carve out her little space for herself there.
Wow. That's really cool that you were able to bring in your real life experience in this book. That's really amazing.
It's been a fun ride. I am still working on the final two books in the series, which are Becoming Spellwright and Master Word Mage. They will happen. in in the meantime, I am publishing other books because it's sometimes you need to give a story time.
Mm,
And just
agree.
like with the storyteller, I was, with the Apprentice Storyteller, I needed that information about, him being the mentor for her life coaching and she being the mentor for his teaching to kind of click for
Hmm.
myself before I could then go ahead and write the story properly, because I'd been dabbling in it, but it just didn't want to fit properly. And so now, then I
I know
wrote it
how
in
that
3 weeks.
is.
When I had the idea and I understood what I needed to do for this book, it took me 3 weeks to write 60,000 words.
Oh, that's awesome. That's that's wow. I don't
Yeah,
wow. That's
it
really awesome.
it I couldn't stop it. It was a waterfall. It just kept going.
That's so cool when that happens. I don't think I've ever written 60,000 words in 3 weeks, but I also have a day job. So,
It was
you that
pretty intense, and I haven't done it that way since.
but that's a really cool experience to have
Yeah.
to know that if it flows that well, you could do it again. Like,
Absolutely. And also the knowledge that, well, it's not going because the time isn't right or
yeah.
because you're still missing something, a very important puzzle piece. And
Yes.
to keep working,
100% that.
keep researching, keep looking, keep experiencing life, because eventually when the click happens, it will go without any trouble whatsoever. I've definitely experienced that several times where I've had books that, no, I don't want to write it just yet.
Oh,
No, it's
yes.
like it's not working. It's like I have the outline in my head, but there's like scenes that aren't working yet.
Or
And
there's gaps and you're
or there's
like,
gaps,
there's
exactly.
this and there's this. How do we get from here to here? Come on, characters. A clue, something.
Or I write myself into a corner and I have no
Oh,
idea where I'm
all the
going. And it's
time.
like the next page is blank and I
Hmm.
have no idea what to do. And
Yep.
there, just packing it up, not stressing about it, letting it go, get back to it eventually. It works for me every time. And
Yeah.
with way less stress. So I don't stress about writer's block or anything. I move on to another project, do that one. Then I come back when I'm ready.
That's a really important that's a really important point that you made. I was like sometimes you sometimes I can't do that because I've said, okay, this is coming out this month. I
Yeah.
can't be like, okay, let's put this aside as I don't
I,
have a ton of time to write. So whenever I sit down, like we gotta move it along. The characters have got to be there. They got to be on time, ready to go with all their
that is very
everything.
true. And when I do have a deadline and it's kind of looming, I'll I'll take a walk and just ask the question, well, what's the character going to do next? And I try to frame it from that perspective. And sometimes I'll get the answer, and otherwise I have to force it somehow. But it's
Yeah,
been rare needing to force anything because I generally get the answers intuitively at one point or other.
yeah. The worst is when the
And,
character's like, I don't know. You're the
yeah,
author. You tell me what to do. I'm like, I don't write plot driven books here. This is character driven. You need to tell me what you're gonna do.
yeah. Or then things happen like a project I had no intention of starting until I'd finished the ones that I'm busy with. And then it turns out it's an urban fantasy set in Sweden, and current events in Sweden meant I just have to write this book now because otherwise I will publish it too late.
Oh, that's so cool. Cause a lot of urban fantasy is set in the US, which is, it's just fine.
Cool. Yeah.
But like, I love when you find one that's not written in the US, because then you get to learn about a new place. You get to visit somewhere else. A lot of urban fantasy is set in Chicago or New York City or LA, and I'm like, okay, been there many, many times. Not physically to Chicago, but to other
Of
places.
course, but
Like,
I know, and
what's something
I think
new?
that it's mostly American writers who write urban fantasy, but I do like the fact that I've been seeing a little bit more urban fantasy coming out with other settings, which is fun. And yeah, so that urban fantasy project has totally taken over. It's completely hogged my creative time, and the rest of the Word Mages, the Wishmaster series has kind of taken a backseat for a bit.
So you're writing the urban fantasy now. That's what's
I'm
currently
currently
in your
writing the
queue.
urban fantasy, which is not at all connected to the Apprentice Storyteller series.
Oh, okay. Oh, they're not connected. What you
No,
said? You
this is the
said
only one that's not connected. It's a completely new thing. But so to get back to the Apprentice Storyteller,
yes, yes. And then I do
from
want you to talk about the connections because I think that's
yes,
very cool. I
because
connect my own stuff and I find it
yeah.
interesting. You're one of the few people I've talked to who does the same thing, and like we must chat about that because
Well,
it's
so
neat.
what I like to write is holistic novels that can be read as standalones, but that then have little pointers in them to other novels that I've written in this particular world. So as I mentioned, so there's the Apprentice Storyteller and Finding the Way, which are sort of the sequel for the storyteller. And in Finding the Way, the storyteller becomes archivist of the library, of the Imperial Library. And this is now where the connections come in, because that's where she then has access to all the resources of the Empire. But one
Oh,
of the
so
duties
she's
of
your connection.
yeah, she's a connection. So one of the duties that I've created for the archivist is to actually, find some old document and write a story about it. And so what I did was I connected that up to my very first novel, or my very first duology, which is a retelling of a lesser known fairy tale. And in it, I have the archivist finding the manuscript that she then decides to work with, but discovers that it's only half done. And the rest of the story is a famous story that they know. It's like it's part of their history. But she wants to give her spin on it based on her research. And so that is what is currently published as Aspiring, Part 1 of the Sibling's Tale, and Becoming, Part 2 of the Sibling's Tale, is the story that she wrote. And I am actually really excited. I'm doing an anniversary edition of these as a single volume this year.
Oh
So in
wow.
May, I will be publishing The Sibling's Tale. Because that's how I always wanted to publish it. But back when I started, it was the only book I'd actually finished writing. So my coach suggested I split it into two, seeing as it was in two parts, and created two publications. But the thing was that the fairy tale retelling is actually what I was on about, and most people haven't actually read it. So I thought it would be better to have it as a single volume now that I have more books out.
And you
And yeah, so
go on.
there's like this connection between the
Mm-hmm.
storyteller and my fairy tale retellings. There's a connection to another one of my retellings, which is called Jahara's Choice. It's a retelling of The Tinderbox by Hans Christian Andersen. And here is the lovely cover of that one.
And for the folks who are just listening,
Yeah,
can you describe that?
right. So it's got my Princess Jahara sitting on the windowsill with the moon behind her, and the windowsill is sort of an Arabic style building, because I was basing it on mainly Ottoman time period for the culture, but also a little bit of Persian influence for my culture. And then she's wearing a traditional skirt and blouse. Unfortunately, my designer couldn't find anything properly Ottoman, because obviously the time, it's too long ago. So we had to go with the Eastern European traditional dress. But it's one of my readers got uppity about it because the dress is not correct to the culture that I've created. But when the graphics that are available don't match the culture that you've created, you have to go with what you can feasibly deal with, right?
Yeah, you have to get the closest approximation and just cross your fingers.
Exactly, and hope that it'll work. And this, I mean, it looks lovely because the skirt, the bright red in the skirt, really comes out nicely with Jahara's choice. Yeah, so the idea is that the fairy tale retellings I write are sort of the ancient history of the empire that features in The Apprentice Storyteller. And then I also have written my own short fairy tales as novellas that I've framed with the apprentice telling them. So each of those tales starts with Joe the apprentice, in the moment of he's about to start telling the story. And then you get the story, and it ends with an epilogue about how he finishes the story in his time, which has been a lot of fun to write.
That
Kind of
sounds fun.
connecting it all together in that way.
Yeah, that's so neat. I love that there's a library and there's an archivist and they're finishing these tales that you have already written.
Yeah.
I like that conceit. Like, that's so neat.
And also that the word mage's tales, which are the fairy tales that I've written myself, offer sort of more insight into the origins of the actual empire, how it came about, and what the politics are that created the empire, which also makes it a lot of fun for readers who've read everything, because they say, like, wow, the world is really big and there's so much happening because it spans several thousand years.
No, that's neat. I like the way you connected it. Not with characters that carry over, which is what I do, because everything takes place in almost the same time period.
Right.
Most
I
books
do
take place in the same
technically have,
country, too. So they can bump into each other on their separate adventures.
well, I do kind of have some of that in the other fairy tale retellings that the archivist doesn't necessarily have access to. So I've written a retelling of a ballet, Giselle, that's essentially the parents' story from before the siblings' tale. So it's sort of one generation earlier, and that one is like lost to time and would not be in the archives. Another one is my retelling of the Nixie of the Mill Pond, which is a backstory for a character who disappears in the siblings' tale. And I needed to explain who she is before I can explain why she disappeared. So she's going to get another book later on with why she disappeared. But there are then also, I had a friend and the brother in Naia's Wish, which is the Nixie of the Mill Pond retelling, that then each get their own story. One of those is in Jahara's choice is the love interest, is the brother of the girl in Naia's Wish, and her friend Zafira is going to get her own adventure now in a book I'm publishing in September with a box set called Castle of Secrets. That's it.
Oh,
a box set of retellings, and I'm contributing to it with a retelling of the first half of The Singing Soaring Lark.
Oh,
because
I've
it's
not
a long
heard of
fairy
that.
tale, and I thought, like, I need to give it time, so I will give it 2 parts.
I've not heard of that fairy tale.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm focusing on with the fairy tales, is to retell the ones that are being forgotten, because I think there's so many amazing fairy tales out there, and everyone does a retelling of Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast. And I feel like I'd rather focus on the ones that most people don't even know exist.
And when you retell them, are you changing them? Are you keeping the essential story?
I keep the essential story. I try to answer questions that I had with the fairy tales. So with Jahara's Choice, my big question about the original Tinderbox fairy tale was, well, why did the tin soldier murder the old woman? Because that's a key event in the fairy tale, but there is absolutely no explanation and no reasonable reason for it in the original fairy tale. But when I looked at it through the lens of potential war PTSD, it worked. And so that's kind of the focus I took for Eric's character, is that he's a soldier who's come back from war, he's struggling with PTSD, and he has a trigger moment when he's in the company of this woman and he accidentally kills her because he feels like his life isn't threatened. And so then it works with the fairy tale, it matches the fairy tale in that way, but it adds the explanation of, well, why did he do it? Another thing I did with Jahara's Choice is that I actually gave the princess a story, because in the original Tinderbox, she's a footnote.
Oh!
It's like the soldier has his whole big magical adventure and has some very dubious decisions about like using his magic to fetch the princess out of her tower so that he can like spend a night with her. And I wanted to deal with that as well in a more modern and feminist way. So she actually agrees to come. She's awake and agrees to go with the magical dog. She does not get carted off in the middle of the night while she's asleep, as in the original.
Oh
I
wow, yeah,
also
that's sketchy.
did not let the soldier kill the king and queen and become king because he has magical powers. That I did not follow that ending from the Tinderbox. My other fairy tale retellings are a lot closer to the original. The Nixie of the Mill Pond retelling, I actually focused more on the female characters, because the first half of the fairy tale is from the miller's perspective, because he makes this deal with the naiad, and then things like don't work out because he completely misunderstood the situation. And I wanted to know, well, why did the naiad make the deal? So I told that part of the story from her perspective, and then his wife's perspective, because the deal is that he will give up his newborn son for riches. So he kind of misunderstood that. In the original fairy tale, they even kind of like have this additional thing was, well, maybe the cat just had her litter, or the sheep just dropped a lamb or something, and that's the newborn creature that will cry that he'll hear. And though it turns out it was his child. So I kind of wanted to see the more feminine perspective on that deal in my retelling. And then the second half of the fairy tale is about the boy actually grows up and marries, and then he's taken by the naiad into the pond. And so it's his wife who actually sets off on the quest to rescue him. And that was then, I stayed true to that part of the fairy tale and carried on with her point of view.
Wow, that's an intrepid woman.
Yeah, definitely, very definitely. And though it was good to really bring that one back, because it's a fascinating fairy tale. It has a very strong female character, and it's barely known. Most people don't know it, so it was nice to be able to work with it and do something with it.
No, it sounds like quite the story. And so then coming back to the the Apprentice Storyteller, that one is one of the ones that was lost, right?
Yes. From the perspective of the storyteller in the future, it's the sibling's tale, which is about a girl who becomes queen, and Jahara's Choice, which is about a princess. Those are the ones that have survived. It's also, I suppose, this idea that the records of the wealthy and especially the ruling families are the ones that we retain several thousand years later, while the stories about the common people are the ones that get lost.
No, that's true. We know more about the rich and powerful in history
Yeah.
and less about the common person, unless they pulled a William Shakespeare and did something where history has to stop and take notice.
That's true. And then yet again, he wrote all about the rich and powerful. So
Yes.
it's
So even if the common person makes it into the historical record, it usually finds some way to bring it back to the rich and powerful.
yeah.
That's a cool way to decide which ones the archivist will be able to recover and which ones will be lost.
Yeah. But it's just growing, because I also write short stories. So I have several short stories set even further back in time that are
Oh,
completely
wow.
lost to time. It's kind of fun. I have a spreadsheet with my timeline and which story fits into which epoch, which is helpful.
How far back are your stories going to go?
Well, at this point, I think I span about 2,500 years total with where my stories are placed. Most of them are placed sort of around the year zero in my world. That's most of the word mage's tales, invented fairy tales, are in the between year 0 and year 50, roughly. And then the Apprentice Storyteller is, I think it's like at a 920 or something. And in the other direction, the Sibling's Tale is 400 years earlier than that, and my other fairy tales are about 550 years before. And then I have some of my short stories that go back 1,500 years from year 0.
Oh, wow. What is year zero? Does
It's
that?
kind of when the event happened that led to the empire being created.
I see. I see.
And then the timeline from that moment onwards is the empire's calendar, essentially. It's their record keeping.
Oh, that totally makes sense. That they would have limited records from the time beyond that, because who
Yeah.
cares about, the founding of the empire was the most important thing in their history.
Yes, absolutely. But also the fact that there was a rather monumental disaster that led to the collapse of existing powers. And then that left a vacuum that became the empire.
Do you have any stories set during that disaster and during the founding, or do you
The
plan to?
actual story of the disaster is coming out next year in a charity anthology. We haven't quite decided on the title yet, but thus far it's always playing on name and some kind of saying. So we've had once upon a name and twice upon a name, and third name's a charm. I think we're going. It looks like we're going to be going with 4 names of fortune, but I'll know in a few weeks' time which one we're going with.
Where do you
And
find all these anthologies to be part of?
I'm part of a group of authors who run these anthologies. I've been the What's in a Name anthologies are run by Susan Stradiotto, who's a good author friend of mine, and I actually started together with Alice V.J on the Enchanted anthologies, which are for environmental causes, and so we've been publishing one a year, and the 4th one releases in May. It's Enchanted Skies, which is supporting hurricane relief. And we're probably going to take a bit of a break before we publish the next one, but there is definitely a plan to keep going with both series, because it's a lot of fun. It's a great way to meet new authors, and it's a wonderful way to actually do something in collaboration, because we work together quite closely. We better read each other's stories and
Oh, that's
provide
cool.
feedback for each other and sort of support each other in making these books a reality, and it's a lot of fun to do it. And it also helps a lot on the marketing front because we all share the load. And that means that we often find one or two new readers each year who then go ahead and read everything else we've written.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I hadn't heard of any of these.
Yeah, well, I can send the details about them. They're a lot of fun to work with. And
Yeah, no, I'm
we're happy with the
definitely.
fact that, sure, they don't make a lot of money on their own, but in terms of the bigger picture, I mean, I'd never be able to donate the kind of monies that we have managed to donate over the years. So it's nice. And I also like the fact that these are permanent publications. They're permanently for charity. It's none of this limited edition, 3 months, and then, that's it. And we donate to the charity what we got, and that's that. Which is, I mean, it's also fair, but I like the fact that these two author groups agree that we can have these books published permanently for charity. And I think it's nice.
No, that sounds really neat. I'd heard about the other ones, the more limited ones, but I hadn't. I like the idea of the permanently being for charity.
Yeah.
Like since that was the purpose that some of these stories were written, like
Yeah.
yeah, it wouldn't
Yeah,
make
definitely. And
sense.
it's also,
Yeah.
I don't usually write short stories, but because I've gotten to be part of these anthologies, I've gotten much better at it too. Because it's quite hard to write a fantasy snapshot of a
Oh
world
yes. Oh God,
in
yes.
5,000 or 6,000 words with a story to it. You need the
Yeah.
characters and everything, and then also all the world building.
I,
And
I
it's a
totally
challenge, but it's a
agree.
nice challenge.
Totally agree. I did like 9 or 10 different anthologies for years, and I led one myself. I led 3 myself. And it was every single one of them ended up becoming something much larger. I have whole series that I have 2 whole series that started because I needed to write a short story for an anthology that I was participating in on something
Right.
and could not. The story the characters came to me with, let's say, did not fit in the word limits. So,
Yeah, that definitely happens. We have one author who consistently goes over the word limit, but because the rest of us are either on or under, we let her do her thing because her stories are fun and we love them, so we're good with it. That's, I guess, also a nice thing about being a cohesive group, that we can, we get to make these decisions together, and we agreed that that's okay. She can have longer stories.
yeah, I was the one who needed the longer stories and all the ones I participated
Yeah.
in. Yeah. It's 5,000 words is not a lot to tell
No,
a story, and when you have deep world building, and even if you're trying to write it in like an established world that you've written 20 something books in, it's still like I still find it insanely challenging.
it is, but it becomes easier with practice, I find, and it's a nice way to do things. I find it's fun.
Yeah, no, sometimes there are stories that you don't need a full novel for, but I haven't yet written a short story that's was under 20 something thousand words. That's basically a novella.
Yeah,
And even those were a challenge because the adventure was bigger than I thought.
yeah.
Not good at small adventures. Somehow we have to break the world in some way and then fix it. And doing that in like less than 100,000 words is tricky.
It is tricky, but I suppose what I'm doing, which makes it easier, is that I'm just filling in these tiny little gaps between novels or between the novellas that I've already written, so that it's just a tiny little snapshot, but that when you then read the bigger picture makes so much more sense.
Yeah, I'll have to look for some gaps. Then I end up writing whole novels to fill. I'm writing a
Well,
trilogy right now to fill a gap.
well, I'm writing two novels to tie up a loose end in one of my other novels.
Okay, so you get it. The struggle is
I totally
real.
get the struggle. It's so real.
Yeah. No, but I love the idea of a book of a anthology permanently for charity. Like that's a lot to manage because you need to, every time the payments roll in, you have to send it over.
Well,
And
we do it. We usually do it every 3 months because now the anthologies that have been published for longer, they'll make maybe $20 a month.
okay,
And then we'll put it together, and okay, it's like for this 3 month period, we've got $53 or $62 or whatever. We make the donation based on quarterly.
I like that it's clear there's a constant donations going out to help
Yeah,
these
and it's
charities.
lovely, and it's like then we can announce it to our fans in our fan group, and it's nice to have that continuity. And then with each new one that we publish, there's a little spike in the other books in the series. I've noticed now already we've got the new one coming out in May, and this month the book that I managed 2 years ago has had more sales than in the past 3 months combined.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's like, so it picks up when people notice that, oh, there's a new one coming out, I like the idea, I'd like to read it, but oh, there's 3 other books in the series already, I'll go check those out first.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I want to check them out. You'll have to send me a link to them
I will
after
do it.
this so I can check them out too. I am definitely curious.
Totally.
And I like the idea of buying a book and the money for the book goes to charity.
Absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, sure, it's the royalties, which isn't much, but we
No.
have managed to keep the costs as low as possible. Like, for 3 years running now, we've had covers donated, so we didn't have to pay for the cover design on the Enchanted anthologies, and the What's in a Name anthologies is completely. I think we've managed to keep our costs at zero. We do our own formatting, and we have one of the authors who does the cover design, and the author who manages it for free through her business, and she does the editing and proofing for free for these anthologies, and it's amazing that we can then donate all royalties to the charity. Really
That's
nice.
awesome. Because keeping keeping the fees down on the anthologies. As someone who's ran them, it starts to rack fast.
It does, but this is the thing: is we don't pay for marketing. We do all our own hustling. And so, yeah, I suppose we don't have quite as great a reach as we would have if we put money in. But the point is that this is not list aiming. This is just for us to have an opportunity to make a difference with our writing. And, it's like,
Yeah, that's
I
a beautiful
personally feel like
thing.
I've donated way more because I've participated in these anthologies than I ever would have been able to on my own. I always had this idea that I'd have to be, rich and famous as an author first before I could donate to the charities and the causes I care about. And no,
I
it
had
turns
the
out
same idea. That's why I'm liking this.
yeah, well, it kind of really took off. On the spur of the moment when Russia invaded Ukraine, I just did a call for authors and put together a charity anthology to support a Ukrainian charity that provides psychological support for children who have witnessed war. And right now, obviously, on the ground, they're helping families with younger children to, get out of danger zones, to get them to safety. And they provide psychological support throughout the entire experience. But the whole point that why I chose this specific charity is that they've been in existence since the invasion of Crimea in 2014. And they've been working continuously with these children even since then.
Oh
So
wow.
for me, it's like well, when the war is over, these people will still continue to work with the children that have been affected, even
Yeah, yeah.
after the war is ended. And that's why I kind of went like, I'm supporting them.
Hmm.
And I put together a multi-genre anthology, which
I
was my
remember
first time ever
seeing.
doing that.
Yeah, I remember seeing it, and then I couldn't find it again because,
Oh yeah,
and then it closed, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess I missed it. So I work a lot, so
yeah,
I
yeah,
remember seeing it, and then I couldn't find it again because I couldn't remember. Like, I probably saw it at like midnight when I was supposed to be sleeping, and then I just couldn't find. Yeah,
where it was posted. Yeah.
yeah, because we're all
Well,
part of so many
we
author
got
groups.
14, we got 14 really nice stories, and I think it's raised around $500 now over the past 2 years. So it's decent, and it will continue to make a difference even later. And what I really found so fascinating about it was that one of the authors whose debut short stories in that anthology is actually talking about doing a charity anthology for victims of gun violence in the United States. So, it's like it has this kind of ripple effect that,
Yeah,
like, I did a charity anthology and now I've inspired someone else to do one. And we'll see if she gets it off the ground. I'm hoping she will.
it's a lot of work. I've
It's a
led
lot of
three
work.
anthologies. It's a lot of work, especially if
Yeah.
you're like running it on your own, which I was. It didn't. So the authors who were part of it were helpful, but at the end of the day, like if you're running it,
Yeah.
it's everything still falls on you.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. It's a lot of work to run an anthology. And it's definitely something I've agreed now with the Enchanted anthologies that we're going to do, that you get an assistant. It's like, yes, I'll run it, but I need one of the authors to be my assistant to help with, prodding authors to achieve deadlines and
yeah. That
remind people
is a
to
full
just sign
time
up for
job.
ARCs. And yeah, because it is.
Yo,
And if
yeah.
you're
Oh, it was.
worrying about, you know, getting everything listed correctly on Amazon and Goodreads and getting all the authors connected and listed correctly, was spelt correctly, it's quite a lot of work. And just,
Yeah, unless you're running it, then you know your
uploading
name is
files
correct.
on the correct day. Yeah, well, I mean, like, I helped out with formatting on one of them, and the author name is just slightly different from the real name, and complicates matters.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. As someone whose name is constantly misspelled in places, I feel that.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. Your name is rare. It's a rare name.
Well,
I thought,
my last
yeah.
name is actually Slavic. It just means curly hair. But like every Slavic language has a completely different spelling of it, and it doesn't help that my grandfather, when he came to the US, didn't speak
Right.
any English and couldn't read or write any English.
Right.
So so anytime I meet somebody of Slavic ancestry, they're like, "Oh, it's spelled wrong," and I'm like, "You know how many variations there are?" Because I looked it up once out of
Yeah.
curiosity, and completely different spellings everywhere you look.
Yeah.
So, I'm like, this is what I inherited. If my grandfather did eventually learn to speak and write in English, and if he never bothered to change it, it must be close enough.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, also that whole thing of changing names is. I like the fact that we now live in a world where people don't change their names to sound more English, because my mom's family is of Italian descent, and I
Mine
mean,
too.
my great granddad was Pietro, but in South Africa, everyone knows him as Peter because he had to change his name, otherwise he wasn't going to get a job, kind of situation.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad that some of that is changing. And
Yeah,
it's still
definitely,
hard for people who have very ethnic names. There's still discrimination.
of course. Yeah.
It's
It is
more
hard.
Yeah, it's more against certain ethnic names and than others, but I wish that would go away because your name is your name. No one should discriminate against that.
Mhm.
You didn't get a choice when the names were given out. It's not like mom and
No.
dad were like, "Hello, baby. What do you want to be called?" you know? You couldn't raise your finger and be like, "Actually, I'd like something easy to spell and pronounce so that people won't look at my name." And you know,
Well, and I mean, sometimes you just seriously luck out, like me, who, I mean, I grew up in South Africa. No one knew my name. I was Ingrid to half the people I knew because they couldn't remember Astrid for some reason. And now I live in
really.
Sweden and I'm a perfectly normal Swedish person.
Oh wow. I but the
It's a
Astrid is
common
not
name here.
Astrid is not a difficult, maybe because I knew an Astrid in school.
I have no idea why English speakers consistently get me as Ingrid, but they do. It's just how it is.
I that boggles. Maybe it's because I live in New York that like, and I'm used to. There's a lot of Europeans, and I've always been surrounded by a lot of Spanish and Italian and different names and
Yeah.
people, people not it's people who come to work for a year or two in New York and then they go back and their kids have to go to school, so I went to school with them. I went to public school, so you
Precisely.
know so but yeah, like Astrid is such a pretty name too. Like it boggles my mind that someone would look at such a beautiful name and completely mispronounce it on
Like,
purpose.
change it to something entirely different.
Yeah, I don't understand that. That's like
And
my mind is
completely
boggled.
unintentional. It's like when I correct them, they go, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry."
But like I understand how that could happen too because like in when I was a kid the most popular name was Melissa, but I'm not Melissa.
No,
I
you're not.
knew like 5 Melissas and 3 different Melanies and a Melody, but I
Yeah.
was not any of those things. I was the only Melinda. And
It
so
also a very curious coincidence. My best friend through school was a Melinda with an E at the end.
really I never seen
Really crazy.
I've only found people with the same name with Melinda, and since only like the last year or two, I've run into Melindas in some author groups on Facebook, and I found some Melindas who are also authors. They don't write the same genre as I do, but which I found really awesome. I'm like, there's a fellow Melinda, and she writes books. It's not just me. I'm not the only one. but it comes from being that lone kid in school who wasn't Jennifer or Melissa, or like there'd be like everybody in class would there'd be like 5 or 6 different girls with different the same name. And
Variations of the
yeah, and
same name.
I'm like one of the few people who had a completely different. I was with the Astrids and the because my name was totally different and not what everybody else had. So I understand that. People would call me Melissa, and I just wouldn't answer because it's not my name.
Yeah.
And there were 5 Melissas in class, so I didn't actually know that they meant me. Until teacher was like, "I'm calling on you. Is it your name, Melissa?" And I was like, "No, they're Melissa, but I'm not. I thought you meant one of them."
Oh gosh, that must make school life so hard.
I went to school with an Ingrid too.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to her. Yeah. But yeah, so I understand about the name thing, and they'd completely solder my last name, and so like they'd be like Melissa. I don't know, can't even remember what they used to say, and I'd just be like, who are they calling? That doesn't sound like me. So at
Yeah,
the
or
end,
like they're
and
looking at you and they're saying Melissa, and you're like,
yes,
"Are you talking to me?"
that's it. I've had that experience so many times, even with extended family members, because some people call me Mel as a nickname, and then they forget that Mel is not short for Melissa in this
Yeah,
case.
true.
So I've gotten that. Um, so I get it. I totally get people calling you the wrong name. Like I have lived that experience. It's not fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe we can all try to do better with names.
Absolutely.
Because
And also those of us who are on the receiving end of the wrong name, we can just, breathe deeply and accept that we're not alone.
yes, yes, yes. Well, no, I knew I wasn't alone because there'd be other people with very ethnic names who'd get completely slaughtered, and they'd be looking at me like, "Are they calling on me?" And I'd be like, "I have no idea." Wait till the end of roll call and raise your hand, because then you can tell them what your name is.
Yeah. Gracious.
That's what I used to do. I wait till the end of roll call and be like, "You didn't call my name." Pronounce it for them, and then they'd be looking through the sheet like, "Where are you?" Maybe I'm not on there. Maybe I don't have to attend this class. I would always hope that, but they would eventually find me. And they'd be like, "I did call your name." I was like, "I didn't hear anything that sounded like my name." Yeah, fun times. I don't miss that.
No, not at all. But I guess it's also, now that you mention it, it's also something that has influenced how I choose names for my characters.
Yes.
To choose names that are easy to pronounce, no matter where you come from, even though they're not ethnically English names. Like Sahara, for example.
Although I've heard my name is actually English, and that I went to and studied in England, and I met 0 Melindas. I was very upset. I was like, I went to where my name is supposedly from. I expected to run into at least one Melinda. Like, I went to college there for a semester. I met no Melindas. I met many exchange students with beautiful names, but no Melindas. I was very upset about that.
That is unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't why I was there, but like, I was like, there should be a perk here. I should finally get to meet someone with my name. So I can ask them, did they call you Melissa too? Or was I the only one? Yeah. Yeah, no, what you said is totally on point. I choose names that are phonetic, that you can look at it, what they look like is how they sound. I have one character who wouldn't let me do that, so I apologize for him. He has lots of vowels because he wanted it. And we had a whole knock him down, drag him out argument over it, and I just finally gave in. I was like, this book needs to continue. If you won't let me change your name, then it's on you if people mispronounce it. When people ask, I was going to say, whatever you think is right, because I tried to fix the name and he wouldn't let me. So he's going to have to suffer with people mispronouncing it. I'm not correcting them. I offered him a choice. He didn't take it.
Yes.
Yeah. So far, only one person has asked because they're the only person who's read it so far. And I was like, whatever you think is how to pronounce it, that is it. I'm not going to go crazy over this.
Yeah.
But yeah. This has been fantastic. Is there anything else you want to say about the Apprentice Storyteller, or many other topics that we've talked about today?
Well, you did actually mention earlier about magic systems. So
yes. Oh, yes. Let's talk about that.
I haven't really gotten to it beyond the fact that when the environment is in balance, the magic is good. So I went with the concept of ley lines. Mm-hmm. So I have a ley line grid over my maps, and where the ley lines intersect, that's where magical power generates for the region, essentially. And so obviously human activities, particularly by magic users, can lead to an imbalance, and that could lead to trouble. Then events like my Nixie making a deal about a child, and then that deal is not fulfilled, leaves a magical vacuum that kind of builds over 20 years and creates a magical vortex, which is what the wife then needs to fix.
Is that what sucked the husband into?
Yes, it sucked the husband into the pond.
That's wild.
And so those are sort of the smaller events that can lead to a magical imbalance. And then in Johara's choice, I go into the much larger type of event, which is that the creation of the magical tinderbox, which is what the fairy tale is about, actually led to a complete imbalance for the entire region.
Oh,
That leads to droughts and forest fires. They also had, other areas have flash floods, and then it kind of you need to actually do a magical ritual to reestablish the magic at a more global level. And the storyteller Viola from the Apprentice Storyteller and Finding the Way also learns about that ritual, and seeing as in her futuristic world, the oceans have dried up because the Empire extracts water from the air, and so then there's no longer any rainfall for
oh
several
yeah.
hundred years. And so then they started using the ocean bed to create greenhouses to grow food in. But then she, just goes on her quest and accidentally finds out that what will reestablish the balance in terms of magic and nature is doing this ritual. And she performs the ritual, and bam, overnight the oceans are back. Everything's cool because it's all magical. And now we obviously have the consequences, which is starvation in the Empire because all their food sources have been flooded by the oceans.
Oh no.
Yeah, which
Wow.
people will find out in the next book because it's
Okay, so that's in book
ends with
3.
she does her ritual, everything's all happy-go-lucky, but she doesn't realize that there's massive consequences for doing it.
I see. So the magic system is all about balance.
Yeah.
But it's not like defined properties of the magic. So it's more
Well, there are defined properties for what humans or what people who can channel magic can do.
Okay.
So, if because you have your inborn source of magic,
Right.
as a person with magic, but you can also draw on the magic in the world around you.
Right.
And so in terms of doing magic, it's better to use the magic around you and channel it through you than to use your own source. So if you use your personal source of magic, the risks of leeching it dry are incredibly high because you obviously don't know how big your personal source is.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that would lead to severe illness, potentially death. And if you survive, chances are you won't be able to do magic again after, because if you wipe out your magic source, that's that.
Yeah.
While the natural harmonies of magic are renewable. So if you use what's outside of yourself and you do it in a balanced way, it should regenerate itself without any problem.
But the magic inside you doesn't regenerate in your world, it sounds like.
It can regenerate with rest and food, but if you've completely burnt it out, then it's burnt out. So, working with that concept of burnout as well, in a sense, I suppose, is that you never truly recover from that, because if you burn out, it crashes your body to a point where it's never going to be able to reach that level again from before the crash.
So it's kind of like a light bulb in that way.
Yeah.
Because like even if you try to repair, like you tried to repair it, it may not. It's not going to work the same.
No, exactly. It's that kind of idea. And then on the overlay, we have one very special magic user who can use words to bend to his will, and he's the word mage. So he can tell stories, he can sing songs, and magical stuff happens because he's just intuitively connected to the whole working of everything, because he lives in harmony with everything, and is in perfect harmony. And so because he can maintain that in his living daily life, it comes through in his magic. And one really cool aspect of the word mage's magic is that he can hear a new word and know what it means.
Oh, that's neat. No dictionary needed for him.
No dictionary needed for him. No, he can even see objects he's never seen before, and he will know what their names are.
That's very cool.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun to write the word mage.
So, and that's what you're working on when the urban fantasy story allows.
Yes, exactly. That's precisely the apprentice storyteller becoming the master storyteller is definitely on hold at the moment, because this pesky urban fantasy has decided that it needs to happen first.
And you said it's based on the urban fantasy story. It's based on like current events in Sweden. What's going on in Sweden that's triggering this?
Well, we need to roll back a little bit further than that. So when I first moved to Sweden, I read a history book about Sweden and was amused by the fact that all the noble families have very magical, easily adapted to magical creature names.
Oh.
So, there's a family called Lion's Head. They are obviously lion shifters. You've got the Night and Day. That is literally their name in Swedish. Night
Really?
and Day.
Oh, wow.
They even have a moon and stars and a sun on their shield. I mean, they have to be vampires. There's no
I mean, I see it. I see it. You're right. Like it's just screaming for it. I don't know. I don't know why somebody else hasn't done it.
And then I just kept going, and it turns out that there was a noble family from the 15th or 16th century that had a wolf on their shield, and they were called Wolf's Son, essentially, that died out at that time. And I think it was like the 1560s or something. Like the last child of the house, died without an heir, and they got scrapped. But it's like, no, werewolves would have to go underground. They'd have to pretend that they don't exist anymore, because that was the height of witch hunts, and werewolves,
yeah,
kind of thing.
And they can't just like be young and live for a long time without somebody noticing, especially at that time.
Right. There's also a Swedish family that's could be, it depends on interpretation, because these words are very close to each other in Swedish. Is troll is the one interpretation, and that's what they have on their coat of arms. But the other is magic, because to do magic is the same root word as troll. Trolls are magical creatures that do magic, essentially.
So it's interesting that like they put a troll as their symbol. Yeah. Other people would not want to associate with the troll, and they're like, let's put it on our shield, because we're badasses like that.
Yeah, well, they're even more badass than that, because it's a beheaded troll that they have on their shield.
Oh wow.
But
so like they own kind of the troll.
A little bit of artistic liberty there, and I've put a magic wand on theirs, because they're the the magicians and enchanters of my world. And the king, the first king of modern Sweden, is from the 1500s, had on his shield a bundle of wheat. And so to me, that was, it's the power of being able to siphon or copy the magic of all the others, and thus, bring greatness through unity. And it would make perfect sense that that particular king, who is by modern standards considered a tyrant, and it's like a general bad guy because he was very aggressive and violent, as like that he would actually technically be a magic user who brought together all the families, kicked the Danes out of Sweden, and then created the noble families of Sweden are magical people.
That's wild.
And so from there, I kind of went, well, what's the caveat? What's the risk with this magic? And there is a history of madness in that family. So that worked really well because, I mean, if you're connected to, like, say, 10 people from different families with different magical abilities, it's like being bonded to them, having access to their thoughts. If you can't shield properly, then I'm sure you'd go mad.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely.
And so that fit really nicely. And then I found out that one of that king's grandchildren became king of Poland. And so then the kid and his uncle were essentially on opposite ends in a war between Catholics and Lutherans, because the Swedes were Lutheran and the Poles were Catholic, and they actually had that war in the 1600s. And that was then when my idea came about, to have a modern girl of Polish descent living in Sweden who is actually the descendant of this king and ends up triggering the magic. And so that was the thing, was that there's the trigger for the copycat magic has to happen in a specific window between 15 and 25. So that's why it doesn't express in every child of the family.
Yeah.
And so in a experience of severe danger, it triggers their abilities, and then they have the power to summon members from the other families to them to protect them, and then to learn the magic from them so that they can protect themselves. And so this girl witnesses a school attack, and there has been one school attack in the city where I live. It was 2 years ago now. No shooting, because you can't get guns so easily in Sweden, but he did hack 2 teachers to death, so not pretty.
Oh, no. I mean, I can't
And,
really talk because the U.S. there's a shooting somewhere.
Yeah, every day. Or
Every day. Sometimes
every
there's
week.
multiple every day. It's a little bit frightening.
Yeah, it's terrifying, actually. And so that for me was, well, when that happened, it was like, oh my goodness, this is the trigger for my character. And it was very cathartic for me to be able to write it, because it is so rare here that it was a huge thing for me. I have 2 children going to school. It's quite terrifying.
Yeah.
Having to all the thoughts, and to be able to just get it out, and even write a little bit from the mother's perspective. And the girl is now worried about her mom, because her mom's like completely on edge all the time, and is even afraid to let her go to school. And then just a few months later, not even, I think it was about 6 weeks later, there was a massive riot here, all over Sweden actually, where several police officers were injured, and loads of vehicles were burned. And so that actually happened over the Easter weekend in 2022. And that kind of found its way into my book as an opportunity for characters to meet, essentially, is around the existence of the riots.
And were those riots, were those about immigration? Because I've heard...
The main thing was, there was a Danish political activist who wanted to burn a Quran and didn't receive permission to burn the Quran, but all the Muslims, because it was Ramadan, had a massive hissy fit because he even asked to do so.
I mean, they can't say yes to that. That's like... Yeah.
Well, the burning of the Quran, I mean, technically falls under the freedom of speech business, but he didn't get permission to do it, and he didn't get to do it. So I don't know why there was a riot, but it was a countrywide riot, and we don't, it happened, and it was quite something. Well, I mean, I was completely oblivious about it until I went to church, and we had to get off one bus stop earlier because the usual bus stop to go to church for was, they'd burnt a bus there the night before. And so that was pretty hectic. So it was completely cordoned off, and there was police everywhere. It was, again, another one of those shocks that I needed to deal with, and I've dealt with them through my fiction.
And is this urban fantasy, so does it have a name? Is it out yet, or are you still formulating?
The prequel novella is out. The series is called the Last Vasa series,
Say that
and
again. The last
Vasa,
Vasa.
Vasa,
That's what I thought you
which
said.
is
And I was like, let
which
me
is the
double
family
check.
name. Yeah, it's the family name of the Swedish royal family from the 1500s to the 1700s, and It's a Bear's Life, That's No Picnic is released. It's about a Somali boy who becomes part of the Bear Shifter clan and who then features in the main story, which thus far I've written Milena's Gift, and then I'm hoping this summer that I'll get the next two, Milena's Nights and Milena's Crown, done. And then I will hopefully publish them late this year, early next year.
So is the urban fantasy series going to just be a trilogy, or is it going to be more open-ended?
It looks like it's going to be a quartet, because
Quartets.
there were events in September and October of last year that would fit perfectly with my character's desire to become a crime fighter and not be a pretty little prissy princess being paraded around royals and that kind of thing. She has no interest in that. She wants to be a crime fighter. And there was a whole wave of murders around Stockholm last year. Because of crime, the gangs infighting, and a vacuum in leadership. So I can totally see her wanting to take that on and clean up this town kind of attitude.
Yeah. Sounds like it. They need it. So it's a quartet unless something happens in 2024 that you need to work out in fiction. Don't give fate, the universe.
Yeah,
Well, not
exactly.
God. He doesn't make bad things happen. But any of the other things out there listening, any idea? Don't give Murphy's Law any room to maneuver here.
But for now, that's kind of why it's been pushed so far now, because the original events are 2 years old already.
Yeah, makes sense.
And now I really need to get the series out so that it's kind of topical instead of something that happened 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, you definitely do. Especially on something as topical. While it's still fresh in people's minds and while they're still grappling with it,
Yeah.
they can grapple with it with the characters who are grappling with it as well.
But my husband read the first book, and he's given me a little bit of feedback on a few things to tweak in terms of the cultural meetings that I have, because I've made
Okay.
very much a multicultural exploration of Sweden, and but he said it's good, so I trust him because he's very, very open about what he dislikes. So he doesn't worry about my feelings that much when it comes to my writing. He's very blunt.
Oh, well, I mean, it's good to have somebody blunt who will give you, because you need to know, if something
Yeah,
isn't working. We sometimes can't tell, or sometimes we have an inkling that something isn't right, and we can't quite put our finger on what or why. So we
yeah,
need that person to bluntly point it out for us. Well, maybe not blunt, but to point it out for us, because we don't know. We're not perfect. We don't have
yeah,
perfect knowledge of everything.
yeah. And I'd rather know now than
Yes.
in 10 months' time when I've published it.
Yes, when you get a review that's like, actually, you're like, oh, I didn't know that. If I knew then what I now know, I could have corrected it.
Exactly. Well, but that's a nice thing about being a self-published author. If I really deem it necessary to correct something, I can, and I do.
Yes. Yes, but then people who've already bought it don't get the corrections.
Yeah,
Amazon,
yeah,
they don't update it. You can fight with them all you like, but it's difficult to get them to send an update. And you'd have to tell readers and get them to argue with it, and it's very
it's
difficult to
difficult.
do
It is.
that.
It is. So
Yeah.
it is definitely better to get it done correctly
Yes.
from the start. Agreed.
That's what I would prefer for those reasons, because then everybody has the correction. If you correct it later, which you can totally do, but then only the people who are buying it new are getting the corrections.
Mm, yeah. Okay.
which sucks. Everybody should get it. When you download the
Everyone
book
should get
again, you should get the corrections, you know?
totally true. Yeah.
But that's not how Amazon does things. I don't know how other retailers do, because my books are wide, and I think yours are too.
Some of mine are wide. I'm working on it.
Yeah, no, because I've seen your books on other stores. I wasn't sure if it was all of them. But yeah, I don't know how other retailers do things. If you correct something, if that correction goes out to everyone, or if it's just the next person who buys it gets the correction.
In terms of wide and only on Amazon, what I'm trying to do is to have box sets, digital box sets that are exclusive to Kindle Unlimited, and the individual books wide. But
You can't, with terms of service, you can't do that. If the box set is in KU, you cannot have the books that are part of the box set anywhere except Amazon. They have to be exclusive. So it's all or nothing.
It's like really, really difficult. Exactly. So
it's against their terms of service, and when they find out, they can terminate your account for that. It's grounds for account termination.
Okay.
So don't play around with that.
Okay. Won't be playing around with that.
If a book is in, even if it's part of something and it's in there, or it's a separate book that's in there, like, then anything that has that story has to be only in Amazon. That's how they do it. Yeah, right now all my stuff is wide. And so I'm always reading the terms of service to make sure I'm within the guidelines.
Case, then perhaps I might be like not even bothering with that option.
I wouldn't, because it's too risky. It's all bots now, and it's difficult to speak to a human, and there's no guarantee that you could get your account back, especially like for something that, like, if they mess up and you didn't break any rules, you may be able to get it back. But if you did something against us, it's almost impossible to get your account back.
Right.
They're definitely close your account and not deal with you. They don't even give you warnings. So I wouldn't mess with it. I would, if you're in KU, follow their terms of service exactly. Don't mess around. It's not worth it. And Amazon is the bigger store, is the biggest store anyways, with the biggest audience. So you don't want to lose access to that.
Yeah.
Because it's against terms of service to get to Amazon if your account's been terminated from another distributor. So and once those distributors find, and they will, because they catch people all the time, they will terminate your account, and then you have nothing. So be careful. So if anybody who's listening who's an author, be very careful. Amazon is a bear. Don't poke the bear. Do what the bear says.
Yeah.
But
so
it's tricky.
Either go KU or go wide. And
yes. Yeah. But you can make the decision book by book or series if you have standalones, or series by series, like, because, one series can be wide, the other can be in KU. They don't have any rules against that. Yeah. And you could have, like, 8 books in the series can be, some of them can be in KU, some of them can be wide. It's when you have the anthologies and stuff, whatever the books that are in it, if they're in KU, the anthologies can only be in KU. The box sets can only be in KU. Yeah. If the books that are in it are wide, then you can't put the box set into KU, but you can put the box set everywhere. So.
Right. Okay.
Just be careful.
Yep.
Don't give Murphy's Law anymore.
No,
bother. Because Murphy's Law says anything that can go wrong will. So be careful out there.
Absolutely. Okay.
This has been fantastic. Is there anything else you want to say about the Apprentice Storyteller, or anything else we've talked about?
I think I've talked myself almost hoarse, so I'm good. Thanks.
I need to keep score on how many people talk themselves hoarse on the podcast. It's happened a few times. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, if you want to add any links that you didn't send, because we had a pretty wide-ranging conversation. You just shoot them to me, and I'll incorporate them. Yeah, but I think that'll do it for this podcast. This has been another episode of Fantasy Lore and More. I have been your host, Melinda Kucsera, and today we talked to Astrid V.J. and we talked about so many different things.
We did.
So. Yeah, we were all over the place. So I think we'll leave you with, respect people's names, don't, especially if they're ethnic, find out how they're pronounced and just show them that little bit of respect. That could be a bright spot in their day and, be good to the environment. We only have one home, the Earth. If we trash it, we don't have anywhere else to go. Mars is not a nice place. Thank you.
And especially if we were putting all the money that's going into that funding back into the Earth, we'd probably be in a much better home anyway.
I would hope so. I mean, they're spending billions of dollars to go to Mars, and I'm like, to do what? To explore it? For what purpose? The rovers did that. Like, it's a hostile environment. If they're gonna terraform it, do you honestly think it's gonna be ready in anybody's lifetime? I mean, maybe like 100 years from now. No, I think it could probably take even longer. And like, if they start terraforming now, like, I'm not sure like when it would be ready to inhabit, or if it would, there would just, too many things.
Too many things, exactly. That's true.
Yeah, so we'll leave you with that positive thought. So, thank you. Have a great day, a great night, wherever you are.